If you thought there couldn't be any more red flags for the upcoming X-Men 97 animated show on Disney Plus, well, we've got a whole bunch more for you here today. Before we get into this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. This is over at thatparkplace.com, and we have a number of red flags from an interview that Animation Magazine did with a number of the people involved in X-Men 97. I didn't know what was the bigger red flag, so I went with this one. You guys will have to tell me in the comments below which you think is the biggest red flag. But this was the headline that I went with. The lead character designer, Amelia Vidal, says she took advantage of the revival to bring in a full variety of body diversity. Vidal informed Animation Magazine's Tom McLean, saying, for example, if we take Jean, Rogue, Storm, and Jubilee, they all have different body proportions, heights, age, physical builds, and posture attitudes. The X-Men are so different from each other. Celebrating those differences makes each character unique and special. So that was, I thought, the biggest thing, clearly embracing this whole body positivity, body diversity movement that's been going around in our culture that's just utterly stupid. So that was what I thought was the biggest red flag, but we got a bunch more. So on top of Vidal confirming the characters were redesigned due to body diversity, the show's director, Jake Castorena, also explained the show's art style was changed in order to, quote, stay relevant. This is what he said. It needs to be the show we remember, but it has to be in 4K because the reality is we've learned so much just in the art form of TV animation itself, from what works, what doesn't work, technical advancements, production advancements, artistic advancements. To do the show verbatim as it was, it would be difficult to stay relevant. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. There's a reason why you're making the show in the first place is because it is still relevant. Because people were still watching it. You had signals on Disney Plus. People were watching that show. They're like, oh, we can make more. We can potentially get more subscribers because people are already liking this. So let's make more of it. That's why you made the show in the first place. Or one of the reasons, at least one of the reasons why you made the show in the first place. And then we got this bizarre comment from Brad Winderbaum, who's a producer at Marvel Studios, one of their big executives behind Kevin Feige. And he was discussing the change in the art style. And he said, well, first he revealed how they are making it look like the 90s show despite changing the art style. He said, part of the design of the overall look of the show is to create a small video transfer effect over the animation to give it a little bit of that television in the 90s patina. He then claimed this: we have a strict code of ethics. However, in his next sentence, he immediately contradicted himself and revealed they don't, because this is what he said. But there are specific points where we crack it on purpose for what I think is great dramatic effect. So they talk about how they have this strict code of ethics when it comes to the look of the show. And then he's like, oh, actually, we really don't. We break it all the time so we can get some dramatic effects. What are you even talking about? This sounds like an absolute mess. And then on top of this probably might have been the biggest thing. I'd probably say this or the body diversity stuff is the biggest one. So this is probably number 2. This is what I originally was going to write about. This was like the hook that I was going to write about. But I thought the body diversity thing was just a way, I don't know. I just feel like with all the Storm stuff, Rogue, I feel like we're getting confirmation of all that, right? They're confirming it. But this is what Beau DeMayo said. He says that the key to the show is melodrama. And he said, and this is how he explained it. It's the melodrama. We will have the cool powers and villains, but at the end of the day, you're more curious about why Apocalypse rearing his evil head complicates Jean and Scott's marriage more than you are about what is Apocalypse trying to do and how are they going to beat him. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It's more about how Apocalypse showing up affects Jean and Scott's marriage than it is like, okay, we got to beat this guy. What is he trying to do? What are his goals? Like, absolutely not. You want to defeat him. You want to defeat the villain. That's what your show should be about. The X-Men is about defeating the bad guys. This is ridiculous. He then made another interesting comment. Interesting. He says, I think it's very smart to bring this show back to take us back to the core truths about who these characters are, why we fell in love with them in the first place. before then seeing how they enter the MCU in a larger capacity. Of course, we don't get any details about what the core truths about the characters are, but I think we know that based on previous comments he's made, he will be rewriting the core truths rather than staying true to the original series. Obviously, plenty of examples here. The biggest one is that he says the entire series is being informed by him being a gay black man. This is what he said during Marvel's X-Men 60 Uncanny Years live virtual event. He said, came up with a pitched it to Kevin Feige, and Kim and Brad Winderbaum could not have been more supportive and also just encouraging to make sure we got it right. I think one of my favorite parts was like they were truly interested in like what my experience as a gay black man was and about how it was going to inform the story we were telling. And that to them was like, that is how we're going to make this authentic. So huge red flag there. He went on to say, because really what you're talking about with X-Men, I don't care what your religion, your nationality, your sex, your gender. You walk into a room full of people and you've gone, oh my gosh, there is no one in here like me. And I think that is ultimately what X-Men is trying to get at. That doesn't even make any sense at all. The X-Men is all about these people are different and then they come together because of their differences. And that is something that they have in common. So who knows what he's even talking about here. And then he goes on and says, and so then I went into the desert for about 2 weeks, came up with the entire first season, and then came back. And, we got Eric Lewald, Julia Lewald, and Larry Houston to come aboard and be like, am I screwing this up? Such amazing creative partners, parents, I call them, just moral and creative support. Clearly I doubt they gave him any kind of moral support. We also had this from Empire Magazine's Helen O'Hara. She said the death of shapeshifter Morph in the original animated series, it didn't stick, obviously, was shocking for young viewers, and it stuck with DeMayo. DeMayo then added, he really set the stakes, and he had a very interesting relationship with the team because of trauma. And then O'Hara announces this. This is a lighter take on the character who is non-binary. So clearly didn't get any kind of moral support from the Lewalds, or if he did, he completely ignored it, and he's pushing this transgender ideology through the character of Morph, who's a male. There's no such thing as non-binary. It doesn't exist. Nevertheless, he goes on and says, and has an interesting buddy relationship with Wolverine. The character's past with Mr. Sinister, the show's villain, could also come into play. And then he seemingly confirmed this. Obviously, people are like, oh, well, he didn't really say it. It was just the journalist who said it. It was just Helen O'Hara who said it. Well, before Helen O'Hara wrote it up, this is what he said at the X-Men 97 panel at San Diego Comic-Con back in 2022 when he introduced Morph. He said, Morph decided to show a little bit of a different side to themselves this season. We're going to go with the changeling look. Again, Morph is a man. He would be himself, not themselves. So clearly the dude is playing with the pronoun gang and is embracing it. Of course he is. And then we had this from DeMayo back in July 2022. He was talking to the direct. He was asked basically how the series would improve upon or differ from the original. And this is what he said. I don't know if improve would be a word I would use. I think that show is amazing in so many different ways. I think what I should say is that the generation who grew up watching the show, we have grown up and the world is a very different place than when that show was first made. And so it is more of a question of what does that show look like knowing what we know now? He continued saying, and how it looks like in today's world with everything that has changed and everything that hasn't changed, sadly, in our world. That is where I believe my focus has been as a storyteller, has been that. So they're literally made a show called X-Men 97 that is supposed to continue the X-Men, the animated show that aired in the 90s. And they're literally just making a show set in like 2024 or whenever 2022, 2021, whenever he was writing this stuff. It's set in like the wokest time period ever. It's absolutely awful. The only reason why they're calling it X-Men 97 is try to bank off the nostalgia of X-Men, the animated series, because it's clearly just Beau DeMayo self-inserting himself, his politics, his immoral beliefs, and trying to slap the X-Men label on it and going to be preaching to you. That's what the show is going to be. I think it's very clear. We've seen enough of this. I mean, we got body positivity in the character designs or body diversity. It's all just woke signaling, woke virtue signaling. This show is going to be an utter disaster and it can't fail quick enough. But those are my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you guys make of all of these red flags here that we see from X-Men 97? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, but to always speak the truth.